Okay, now in a similar way to we did in the other chapters, I'm going to create a new geometry object. And I'm going to call this one particle source object. And we're going to go inside there. I'm going to delete out the default file node and make an object merge. Hit the P key, and then what we're going to do here is I'm going to go to my objects, and I'm going to go to the out debris points. I'm going to make a null. And these are those debris points that came out of that special debris node we were just talking about. Let me go up a level. Let me turn off everything else. And now we can see that this particle source object node is going to be our source node to get our emission points for our particles. Okay, so we've built that. I'm going to make that a light yellow. And as you can see, there's another object that I had already made for you in this scene here, which is the particle source ground hits. And I've built this and provided this already because we're doing a little bit of processing to the impact points we're getting out of the dynamic system. And we want to move on and go right to the particle work. So I've prepared some of this stuff, and we'll just give an under the hood look at what's going on there so I can show you. So we'll go into particle source ground hits. Let me hit C to turn that color off. And this is what's going on here. We've got an object merge here that's pulling in out of the objects those out impact points. And then over here, I have another object merge that's actually bringing out the sim points. These are actually just the points of the simulation for the objects. And then I'm using an attribute transfer to actually transfer over velocity. So basically what we do, we can see our simulation points. So let me turn on a visualizer for velocity here that we've made. We're basically just transferring over the velocity from the actual simulation to these impact points, just to sort of give us a vector. Imagine we're hitting the ground and we just kind of know what direction we were hitting the ground from. So it's just a little kind of easy way just to get a little information on those points that'll help influence the simulation. And then what I've done here is I've built a little point VOP called color from impulse. And what this is doing, I'm going to turn off these vectors for a minute. You can see as I play this, now the points are blue and red, and I'm basically coloring them based on their intensity. If I go to my attribute transfer node here and I go to my geometry spreadsheet, you can see that we have this impulse variable here, attribute. So this is coming out of the dynamic system, and this is a value based on how intense that impulse is. And you can see that this goes from very small numbers to very large numbers. So what I can do inside this point VOP here is I'm basically just rearranging that information and then coloring the points with that information, and then also making another attribute called keep based on if that number crosses a certain threshold. Okay, so we're coloring them, and I do this all the time where we're just making a little VOP to color some data just so it's really easy to visualize like this, because I don't want all these points that aren't red to keep emitting particles because they aren't moving quickly anymore. We only want particles emitting from the fast moving impacts. Then here I'm using a partition node to partition these points into two groups based on that keep attribute I created within that point VOP. Let me pull this window over a little bit more. And then we're just blasting out one of these groups, the blue sort of non-fast moving impacts. Okay, so now I'm going to play this back. We're just processing these points. Now you can see we have much fewer points on screen at any given time. And we are focused just on the more intense impacts. And if we go above this chain here, let's go back to the initial object merge. You can see there are all these points. And now we've just filtered them down to a smaller point set. And then here, this is really simple. I've created a little sort of scattered circle of points. Let me zoom into this so you can see what's going on. Literally just some points scattered on a circle. Go back to my render cam. And basically then what I'm doing is I'm copying over these little circles of more points onto those points. Because at all these impacts, I just kind of wanted more points as source material, and I wanted to manually set that up. So this is just a little way to pre-process some of the information we want to send into our particle simulation. Okay. Alrighty, hit the P key to close the parameters. So here's just a little bit of a different particle source setup than we've had before, where we've basically just been object merging in points from something and using this node as just a setup node. Here we're doing a little bit of point processing, and we're just prepping the data we got out of that DOP import records node in our simulation. Okay, so now we have our two different source nodes for our particle simulation ready to go. And next up, we're going to start actually building the particle sim.